What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future.
Okay, so when it comes to comic books, great big huge crossover events are fun. I mean, those are really fun books to read. But 90% of the time, I prefer really well-written stories about one character. And the Secret Origin 6-issue series by Geoff Johns, oh my God, it's incredible. So here's the deal. There's a couple things that I want to run over here first. The first thing I want to do, and I know this might seem kind of out of left field, but I want to read this to you guys because I feel like this brings context to the story. So in 2013, there was this really good article written by USA Today that talked about Superman. And to paraphrase this a little bit, the article kind of threw in the phrase, since Siegel and Shuster created the Man of Steel in the 1930s, the core narrative in Superman has been and continues to be the values and belief about the US experience being strong enough and good enough to address the troubles facing the generation engaged with the character. During the Great Depression, Tarzan and Flash Gordon were popular in comics because they transported Americans elsewhere. When World War II encroached on our shores, America started getting scared, and then suddenly there appeared an almost straight from the flag character who's come to save us. The Big Blue Boy Scout marched with the troops and fought Nazis in the late 1930s and into the 1940s, but he was also a reaction to industrialization, to the power of big business, and was created as a social agitator, a character who fought for the oppressed and the weak. In the 1950s, Superman went from anti-authority to a sort of uber cop, since the post-war era is where we saw ourselves as the world's greatest peacekeepers. And then the Man of Steel in the 1960s and 70s had stories that touched on the counterculture and young people not really having a good sense of who they were, where they came from, or where they were going. Now, the reason why I read that to you guys is because in DC Rebirth right now, we have the pre-New 52 Superman. This origin story is kind of like the definitive origin story of Superman for the Superman that we're reading right now in DC Rebirth. And the reason for that is because the origin story, as Geoff Johns wrote it, was designed to be hopeful. It wasn't designed to be dark. It wasn't designed to be gritty. One of the most interesting things about this story too is that there's not a single scene that deals with Krypton. Not one. There's not one single instance that shows the explosion of Krypton, Superman being sent away. The reason for that is because that's timeless. I mean, we all know that. Like from 1938, when Krypton was never mentioned and we didn't know who Superman's father was up until, 1958, 59 or whatever it was, when Superman's origin was revamped and we got the name Jor-El and we got the planet Krypton and so on and so forth, all the way up until, 500 years from now, everybody will know that Superman was a baby named Kal-el that was sent away from a dying planet that blew up. We don't need that. Instead, what Geoff Johns does is he opens this up focusing on Clark Kent as a kid in his hometown. And it works out so cool because this is all Smallville stuff and it's uplifting. The other half of this is Gary Frank drew Clark Kent to look almost exactly like Christopher Reeve. Now, the reason why this was done, as best as I can tell, is because this story came out in 2009 or so, which is about 5 years after Christopher Reeves died. Christopher Reeves, is a lot of people look at him and say he's the definitive Superman on the silver screen. There'll never be another Superman as good as Christopher Reeves. Granted, the movies are a little dated, the special effects are a little dated, but Superman 1 will stand the test of time as one of the best movies. And it really kind of catapulted the idea of superhero movies into popularity, starting with one of the probably the most popular superhero of all time. As far as I understand it, the symbol of Superman is more recognizable than the Christian cross. So it's kind of crazy how popular Superman is across the world. But the way that I say this is hopeful isn't necessarily because of the fact that Clark Kent's playing football and accidentally breaks his arm, but it's because of the fact that Clark Kent's learning about his powers. There's a really cool moment here where he's talking with Jonathan Kent, we're talking with his father, and he basically says, you can't go using your powers like this. You have to be careful about what you do. What this tells us is they already know what Superman's capable of. We don't really get the first time his powers appeared. We actually get that as kind of a flashback. And the other cool part of this is that Pete is not like gonna, try to beat up Clark Kent. He's happy about it. And the reason why he's happy about it is because he's got the attention of the girls, man. The girls are like, oh, Pete, it's so sad that you broke your arm. And he's like, yes, it is. Yes, it is so sad. This is so cool. It's so fun. It's so interesting to me, because I was turning the page, expected to see like their friendship totally destroyed, and now Pete hates Clark Kent because he's like, you're a bumbling fool and you broke my arm. No, I mean, this is how we would react. This is how I would react. I mean, if I broke my arm when I was in middle school, high school, and all the girls were fawning over me because, they felt so bad that my arm was broken, I would be like, yes, it is very sad that my arm is broken. You should give me more attention and make my arm feel better. That's exactly what I would be like. But the other half of this is that we also get Lana Lang. Now, this is beautifully done by Geoff Johns in terms of how he introduces Lana Lang here, because Lana Lang has a long history in the Superman mythos. She was really really like the first person to learn that Superman had incredible powers outside of his parents. She's really like his most trusted friend. For those of you guys who are reading the Superman Rebirth one-shot as part of DC Rebirth that transitioned from the New 52 Superman to the introduction of the pre-New 52 Superman taking his place, the whole conversation between the pre-New 52 Superman and Lana Lang, in the sense that the New 52 Lana Lang didn't know who he was, when he was talking to her, he was like, you're not the Lana Lang I know, you know, the one that I know is from a different universe, but she and I have a very long history, we have a very long friendship. I'm hoping we can have the same thing. The reason why that is because she's been very, very important to his life. A lot of writers are kind of teased about the idea of Lana Lang and Superman getting together, but of course, Superman and Lois Lane are the 1-2 punch of comic book romances, and so, you know, they're right up there at the top. I mean, they are the top comic book romance, and no one will ever topple them. But with Lana Lang, she's really his closest friend. What Geoff Johns is doing here is drawing on that. The other cool thing is that the introduction of his powers are coming organically. They're coming naturally. They're coming in ways to where it's usually in a response to a heightened emotional situation. In a lot of ways right now, Clark Kent feels guilty over the fact that his friend Pete's arm's broken. Pete's happy about it. He's getting all the attention of the girls. Nothing wrong with that. But in his stress, in his guilt, he suddenly manifests the ability, or I guess his X-ray vision, to see through things. Now again, he doesn't know how to respond to this. He doesn't know how to react to this. He's panicking. He's freaking out. But again, this is where we learn that Lana Lang knows what he's capable of and that Clark Kent knows what he's capable of. But his understanding of his physiology was largely rooted in the fact that he just had extreme durability, that he was almost completely unbreakable. Now, the way they learned this was by virtue of the fact that as kids, they were playing. You know, they were in a field, they were playing hide and seek, when suddenly a wheat harvester started coming through. Now, Lana heard it, but didn't really know where it was. Clark Kent realized what was happening, jumped in the way, and the shears just, you know, were torn to pieces on his back. And that was when he and Lana came to the realization of what it was that he was capable of, and the fact that there was something different and that he seemed to be completely indestructible. Now, at this point, this is when his heat vision starts to activate. And the way Geoff Johns does this is actually pretty cute. It's actually pretty cool. You know, his first real kiss with Lana Lang, his heat vision suddenly kicks in. Now, Geoff Johns, if you ever happen to see this, I don't know if it was your intention. I don't know if it was your, if it was what you were going for with this, but it's pretty adorable. It's pretty funny. But, you know, of course, in response to this, it kind of sets a fire just because, you know, one of the banners catches ablaze. And again, it's his father sitting down and coming to the realization that Clark Kent needs to be told the truth. And so this is how we learned that he didn't know his true history. All he knew was that, you know, his mom was Martha Kent, his father was Jonathan Kent, and he had no idea about any of the stuff. It's just suddenly these things started happening and he didn't really know why. He was just kind of taking it for what it was and you're kind of rolling with the punches. But the conversation that Martha and Jonathan have while he's in the room is of the nature that Jonathan's like, he needs to know what's going on. And Martha feels like it'll change everything, which in some ways it will. With something like this, you really can't open this box and there's no turning back. But ultimately they decide to take him into the barn and show him the rocket that he arrived in. And this, along with the subsequent scenes, are about as close as we get to Krypton. Because again, I like that Geoff Johns did this. I like that he was like, we don't need to see Krypton blowing up. You guys know Krypton blows up. Everybody knows Krypton blows up. Let's just focus on the character. Let's focus on how he grows, on how he comes to realize what's going on. Now, this thing is pretty cool. The whole idea of what happens, you know, when he's learning about this rocket ship and he's being told, this, you just arrived. We just found you in this rocket ship one day. On the surface, it's intriguing, but because of the fact that, you know, the ship itself, as well as the contents and even the Kryptonian crystals are really kind of synced to Kryptonian DNA, that is to say, to Kal-el's DNA, as soon as he touches it, of course, we get the now infamous holographic image of his parents speaking directly to him. And what Jor-El says is, hey, look, you know, we sent you here from a dying world. The world was called Krypton. It was extremely advanced in terms of science and technology, but there were also a whole lot of tragedies. The issue with this is that in response to getting this message and learning that Jonathan and Martha Kent are not his biological parents, Clark Kent freaks. He loses it. And this, what happens here, is probably the most beautiful moment in the entire comic because he's panicking. He's literally being told, your parents are not your parents. In the mind of Clark Kent, his world's crashing down. Everything he knows is suddenly just being thrown into question. And he doesn't want things to change. This is cool because as kids, our parents get divorced or made to move or something like that. It seems like the world is torn asunder. For whatever reason, as children, we believe that our parents will be together forever. The friends that we make in elementary school will be the friends that we'll have for the rest of our lives. You know, it's that hopeful nature. And this hopeful nature seems like it's being torn to shreds. And it seems like all is lost. But when Clark is at his most desperate and when he's at his most panicky and he says, I don't want things to be different, I want to be your son, Jonathan steps in and says, you are my son. Yes, those are your biological parents, but we found you, we raised you, we taught you right from wrong. No matter what happens, we will always be here. And that is the most beautiful thing, because at the core of all this, it's not some Kryptonian from the other side of the universe with powers of gods that will one day save the planet from some unknown mystery threat in some unguaranteed future talking to some normal human guy. This is a father and a son, and it is a beautifully done moment by Geoff Johns. I absolutely love the way this unfolds. But from here, we kind of switch over to Lex Luthor for a second. Now, the introduction of Lex Luthor is kind of a fly-by-night. I mean, it's not the greatest thing in the world, and it's cool that Geoff Johns did this because Geoff Johns is really, really good at saying, hey, like, here's a thing here, and it'll be important in like 4 issues. So, you know, it's there, but I really hope you remember it because it'll be very important later on. Geoff Johns is super good at doing that, and it really works well for creating a really cohesive story with threads that kind of go out into everything. That's why I say Geoff Johns and Hickman are 2 of the best writers, if not the 2 best writers in the realm of comic books right now. But Lex Luthor, as things are depicted here, he's really coming from a damaged home. You know, he's really coming from a father who's an alcoholic, coming from a mother who is presumably abused by her alcoholic husband. You know, he's really seems to be kind of running away from his situation, but of course he stumbles across a chunk of kryptonite. Now, of course, in response to this, again, we don't really get a whole lot here. Instead, what we do is we pick up with Clark Kent the following day with glasses. Yes, the iconic glasses of Clark Kent. Oh man, I swear, I feel like you could go anywhere and you could just see a set of glasses just sitting somewhere, and even if it takes you a minute or two to realize it, it's like, those are Clark Kent's glasses. It's kind of cool, you know, that it kind of turns out that way. But of course, like any teenager who's forced to wear glasses, he's like, Mom, I look like a dork, you know. And again, this is just so cool. The character reactions just come out together so well, and it's so awesome. But what we're also told here is that Jonathan and Martha had come to the realization that when the heat vision of Clark Kent activated, while he was being told by, you know, the holograms that Jonathan and Martha were not his biological parents, that the heat vision didn't do anything to the crystal itself or to the ship. So with a couple shards that fell off, what they came to the realization was if they take those shards and turn them into lenses, that Clark Kent, you know, will basically have a kind of protection for the heat vision that comes out of his eyes should he use it or should it activate without his intention. And so from here, one of the cool things is we really just kind of pick up with a continuation of this message when Martha touches the crystal, and we just kind of learn a little bit more about this. Of course, we see some images of Brainiac, some images of Darkseid, really a lot of foreshadowing here, some of the things that may come to pass later on, some of the things that have existed in Krypton already. It's really just kind of Geoff Johns saying, hey, here's some familiar faces that you guys might recognize. But the other half of this, though, is that we also pick up with Clark Kent back at school. Now, again, the funny thing is because of the fact that he injured Pete, because of the fact that his strength is so capable, because his durability is like hitting a brick wall if somebody hits him too hard, he's really kind of forced in a situation where he just can't play football with his friends anymore. So it's constantly excuses like, well, I had a stomachache because I had bad eggs, you know, well, I've got allergies, so on and so forth, you know, it's supposed to rain, you know, stuff like that, you know. And of course, Lana Lang hears a lot of the excuses that he's making, and she's like, dude, you got to come up with much better excuses than that, because those are absolutely pitiful, those are pathetic. And so again, transitioning to this fair in Smallville, that Clark Kent attending, of course, he comes across Lex Luthor for the first time. Now, this is really Geoff Johns pulling with a lot of the Superboy mythos from before Crisis on Infinite Earths. And what I mean by that is where Lex Luthor was introduced as Superman #4 as really, you know, Superman's first major villain that was not like some small-time crime boss or some small-time criminal, you know, robbing a bank or something like that. In the Superboy comics, in order to bolster their popularity, what Siegel and Shuster did is they basically started grabbing a lot of the main villain from Superman's comics and basically said, here's why they're enemies. And so what we learned was that in the Superboy comics, the Superboy had accidentally screwed up an experiment of Lex Luthor, which resulted in Lex Luthor believing that Superboy did it on purpose, turning the two into enemies forevermore. That was kind of a thing that really went on for a while going into Crisis on Infinite Earths. I don't really remember if they touched on it after Crisis on Infinite Earths, but this is really Geoff Johns kind of grabbing back to that pre-crisis history and saying, hey, look, you know, here is how far back Lex Luthor and Superman go. Now, of course, Clark Kent being exposed to green kryptonite immediately takes it by surprise. You know, it seems to have the same effect that it normally would, that it almost seems to kill him. But of course, stumbling away, getting away, kind of coincides with a tornado hitting the fair. Now, this is kind of a crazy set of circumstances, but what it does do is it gives us the first instance of Superman flying, where Lex Luthor's running away with his green kryptonite. Lana Lang is kind of sucked up by the tornado, and Clark Kent jumps in and actually saves her and flies out of the tornado. Of course, he's not able to maintain his flight for any real measure of the time, and the two of them just kind of wobble through the air and then eventually land in a lake. And then, of course, the response, she kisses him, and following this, like, he's freaking out with Jonathan. He's like, I flew, man, I flew. And it's like the coolest thing ever, you know, because it's like, if you were a kid and you realized you could fly, I would be like, yeah, man, I can fly. Like, I'd fly at night. I wouldn't fly in the daytime so people could see me. But another thing that was kind of going on behind the scenes here is Martha had come to the realization, you know, with Clark saying, hey, look, I have these cool powers. I have heat vision, you know, I have x-ray vision. I can fly, apparently. I'm super strong, you know, I'm super durable. Like, I'm gonna help people. Like, I'm gonna do good things, and I'm gonna be a hero, and I'm gonna help people. And Martha's like, you're not gonna do it wearing those outfits, which, I don't know, I think it'd be kind of cool to see Superman be a hero in like jeans and a t-shirt like we saw in Superman Truth. That was actually a really cool costume, a really cool outfit. But what she does is say, hey, here's the blanket you were wrapped in as a kid, and what we're gonna do is we're going to turn this into a costume that you can wear. Now, of course, he's like, this is ridiculous. I'm not wearing that costume. It looks terrible. But of course, his mom went through all this work to make it happen. How can you say no to mom? And so following this, he basically puts on the costume, which is him wearing this Superboy uniform for the very first time, which is a beautifully crafted little moment here. But again, this is a gorgeous story. I mean, this is just an incredible story. If you don't have it, I highly suggest you pick it up and read it. It is incredible. But there's actually like 5 other issues. And the cool thing is that they're all basically one-shots that tell a cohesive story. So it's really interesting the way this all comes together. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, if you guys enjoy this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like. I may end up doing this next week. I think I will. I think that, what is today? I guess by the time you guys see this, it'll be Wednesday. So I think what we'll go ahead and do is like do this like every Wednesday until it's finished, which is only like 6 issues. It's not that long. So I guess it'll be like 6 weeks. But yeah, it's a beautifully done story. But leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about Geoff Johns, Superman's Secret Origin. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.